The stars outside the large window looked still, but Captain Laura Bennett knew the ship was drifting slowly in the dark. The navigation system had failed 2 days ago, leaving them stranded in an unknown part of space. She stood on the bridge looking at the faint glow of distant suns. Every so often, her eyes moved to the small light on the console that showed the distress signal was still broadcasting. Jack Morris, the ship's chief engineer, was working below deck. His hands were covered in grease, his shirt sticking to his back from the heat of the engine room. He had been trying to fix the navigation system since the failure began. Each time he thought he had found the problem, another part failed. The old colony ship was not built for long voyages through dangerous space, and Jack knew they needed help soon. In the medical bay, Claire Brooks checked the supplies again. There was enough medicine for a few weeks, but not much more. She kept her hands busy to avoid thinking too much about what might happen if help never came. She trusted Captain Bennett, but the silence of space made her uneasy. Laura tried to keep the crew calm. She told them their alien allies would answer the call, just as they had promised during the trade agreements. She spoke with steady words, reminding everyone that their friends had faster ships and could reach them soon. Inside, she worried about the time it would take for the message to travel across the stars. Life on the ship slowed to a quiet routine. Crew members moved carefully through the narrow halls, speaking in low voices. The hum of the engines was constant, a reminder that power was still running, but the risk of more failures was always there. Jack asked for more time in the engine room, and Laura gave it to him, knowing that keeping busy was better than sitting still. Far away, the distress signal traveled through empty space. It passed the edges of known trade routes and crossed uncharted areas. Signals like this could fade or be lost. But this one was picked up by a group of travelers. No one on the colony ship expected to hear it. The ship that caught the message was nothing like the smooth, bright designs of their alien allies. This one was built for survival, its hull dark and scarred from years of harsh travel. Inside were humans who had lived their lives on dangerous planets, where every day was a fight to stay alive. They were known as Deathworlders, and they carried a reputation for being fierce and unpredictable. Captain Dean Carter sat in his chair, reading the signal.
Ow!
His eyes moved over the details. Human ship, stranded, life support stable, but navigation lost. The message had no signs of danger, but Carter knew better than to trust appearances. Space was full of predators that waited for ships to break down. Plot a course, he told his pilot. We go now. Back on the colony ship, the crew continued to wait. Some played cards in the mess hall, trying to keep their minds off the silence. Others sat by the windows, watching the endless dark. Claire made her rounds, checking on the few passengers who had grown restless. Laura stood on the bridge again, her hands on the console. She wondered if the message had reached anyone at all. The thought of her crew losing hope made her chest tighten. She had to believe help was on the way. Hours later, the sensors picked up something. A ship was approaching, fast. Laura felt a wave of relief, expecting to see the sleek shape of their alien friend's vessel. She ordered the crew to prepare for docking, smiling for the first time in days. But when the ship came into view, it was nothing like what she expected. The dark armored hull looked as if it had been through battles and storms. Her smile faded. Whoever they were, they had come a long way through dangerous space to reach them. On the other ship, Dean Carter looked at the drifting colony vessel. He had seen ships like this before, broken and left for dead. He was determined this one would not meet the same end. The colony ship hung in space, quiet and still. Captain Laura Bennett stood on the bridge, staring at the approaching vessel. It moved with purpose, its engines burning bright against the black. The shape of the hull was heavy and strong, covered with deep marks from battles long past. Laura had never seen a ship like this up close. Jack Morris entered the bridge, wiping his hands on a rag. He followed Laura's gaze and frowned. "That's no ally ship," he said softly. His voice carried a mix of caution and curiosity. He had heard stories about humans who lived far from the safe core worlds, on planets filled with storms, beasts, and endless danger. They were called Deathworlders. People said they were strong but unpredictable. The docking process was tense. The crew gathered in the narrow hallway by the airlock, waiting. Claire Brooks stood near the front, her medical bag over her shoulder, just in case. The hiss of the airlock opening made everyone stiffen. Then they saw them. The Deathworlders stepped inside like they owned the space around them. They wore heavy armor marked with dents and scratches. Their boots echoed on the metal floor. At the front was Captain Dean Carter, tall, with sharp eyes that scanned everything without pause. Behind him, his crew moved with the same alertness, as if danger might appear at any second. Laura stepped forward and introduced herself. "Captain Laura Bennett, Colony Ship Horizon's Reach. We sent a distress call." Carter nodded slowly. "We picked it up. You're a long way from safe space." Laura expected questions about their situation, but instead, Carter turned to one of his crew members and gave quick, direct orders. Two Deathworlders moved past the colonists without hesitation, scanning walls and doorways with handheld devices. Their movements were fast and practiced. "What are they doing?" Jack asked. "Checking for threats," Carter said simply. "If you're stranded out here, you're not alone. Things live in the dark. You might not see them until it's too late." The colonists exchanged uneasy looks. They had been stranded for days without seeing anything unusual. Still, the Deathworlders acted as if danger could be seconds away. Within an hour, the visitors had set up equipment in key parts of the ship. Portable shield emitters lined the main corridors. Motion sensors were fixed near the airlock and storage areas. The colonists watched in silence as their ship was transformed into a guarded outpost. Claire found herself talking to one of the Deathworlders, a woman named Nora Lane, who carried a compact medical kit strapped to her chest. Nora checked on the passengers with quick but careful hands. Her manner was calm, though her eyes never stopped scanning the room. Claire was curious about her training. "You treat people while keeping watch?" Claire asked. Nora gave a small smile. "Out where we live, you never stop looking for danger. But you still help the wounded. You do both, or you don't survive." Jack spent time with the engineers from Carter's crew. They spoke little at first, but Jack noticed how they handled the ship's tools like weapons, always ready to act quickly. They inspected the navigation systems, but also checked vents, bulkheads, and even the hidden spaces between panels. Jack began to realize that their caution was not fear, it was habit. Later, Carter asked Laura for a private word. They stood on the bridge, the low hum of the ship surrounding them. "You're in a bad sector," Carter said. "There's a species out here that hunts stranded ships. They watch and wait until the crew grows weak, then they strike. Your distress signal might have reached your friends, but it could have reached them too." Laura felt a chill run through her. "We've seen nothing. They're patient," Carter replied. "We're here to make sure patience doesn't win." The bridge fell quiet. Outside the windows, the dark seemed deeper than before. Laura understood now why the Deathworlders had come so fast. It was not just to help, it was to fight if needed. By the end of the day, the colony ship felt different. The corridors were no longer silent. There was movement, the sound of boots, and the faint buzz of new devices guarding every entrance. The colonists felt both safer and more aware of the danger that might be close. In the quiet of the night cycle, Jack passed through one of the newly guarded halls. He saw a Deathworlder standing watch, eyes fixed on the shadows beyond the viewports. Jack realized that whoever these people were, they did not fear the dark. They lived in it, and they had come here prepared to face whatever waited there. The next morning's cycle on the colony ship began with a warning from the motion sensors. A soft tone rang through the corridors, enough to wake the crew without causing panic. Captain Laura Bennett was on the bridge within seconds, and Captain Dean Carter was already there, studying the sensor display. "Something is moving near your outer hull," Carter said. His voice was calm but firm, not debris. "It's controlled movement." Jack Morris arrived a moment later, still pulling on his jacket. He stared at the screen where small dots pulsed slowly in the darkness outside the ship. "What is it?" Jack asked. "Predators," Carter said. "They are testing your defenses. They never rush. They want to see if you react." Laura's stomach tightened. The thought of something moving out there, unseen in the black, was worse than open battle. "What do they want, your ship?" Carter said. "And everything on it." Carter ordered his crew to spread out along the ship's vulnerable areas. The Deathworlders moved quickly, setting up more sensors and placing armed guards at each main access point. They did not raise their voices or waste time with long talks. Every action seemed practiced from years of experience. Claire Brooks worked with Nora Lane in the medbay, preparing for possible injuries. Nora explained that these predators often tried to capture rather than destroy. "They take people," she said quietly. "If we stop them from boarding, we win." Hours passed with no attack. The dots on the sensors would appear, move slightly, then fade back into the black. Carter explained they were studying the ship, learning its weak points. As the crew went about their duties, Jack joined two Deathworlder engineers outside the main navigation room. They checked structural panels and sealed access doors. One of them, a broad man named Vince, showed Jack how to spot hidden weaknesses in the hull. Out here, Vince said, anything loose or thin is an invitation to be torn open. Night cycle came again, but no one truly rested. The ship felt tense, like the air itself was holding its breath. Carter walked the corridors, speaking quietly to his crew and checking the guard stations. Laura followed him at one point. "You've dealt with this before," she said. "Too many times," Carter replied. "They look for the smallest opening. They wait until your crew relaxes, then they come fast. I can't give them that chance." Suddenly, the motion sensors triggered again, this time with a sharper tone. Carter stopped in his tracks and looked toward the nearest viewport. In the faint starlight, shapes were moving, low and fast. They clung to the shadows, their outlines strange and hard to follow. "Positions," Carter said into his com. His crew responded instantly, spreading to the defense points. Laura stayed on the bridge with Jack, watching the sensor data shift. The predators were circling the ship now, closing in slowly. A faint tapping sound came from the hull. Jack froze at the noise. "They're testing the metal," Carter explained over the comm. "Looking for a weak point." Claire's voice came through from the medbay. "We're ready for wounded if it happens." The tapping stopped. For several long minutes, nothing happened at all. The bridge was silent, except for the hum of the systems. Then one of the outer cameras caught a flash of movement, clawed appendage scraping against the hull before vanishing. "They're telling us they're here," Carter said. "They want us nervous." The Deathworlders did not appear nervous. They stood watch without moving much, eyes fixed on their assigned areas. Jack noticed that their weapons were kept low but ready, and that they spoke only in short, quiet updates. By the end of the cycle, the predators had withdrawn again. The sensors showed nothing but empty space. Laura let out a slow breath she had not realized she was holding. "This is how they work," Carter told her. "They wear you down before they strike. But they're learning something else right now, that you're not alone." Laura nodded, glancing at the guards stationed outside the bridge. The Deathworlders' presence was like a wall between the colonists and the darkness outside. She still felt fear, but it was mixed now with a growing sense of resolve. For the first time since they had been stranded, she began to believe they might actually survive this place. The warning came during the middle of the next work cycle. The sensors flared with red lights, and the sharp tone echoed through every corridor. Captain Laura Bennett rushed to the bridge, and Captain Dean Carter was already there, watching the screens with steady eyes. "They're coming in fast," Carter said. "This is it." Outside the ship, the black space was alive with movement. Shapes darted between the stars, heading straight for the colony ship. The predators had stopped waiting. They'd chosen to strike. Carter gave quick orders to his crew, and they moved with speed and purpose. Deathworlders took their positions at every defense point. Laura turned on the ship-wide comm and spoke to her crew. She told them to stay calm, to follow the Deathworlders' lead, and to hold their ground. The first impact came against the outer hull, a heavy thud that made the ship shudder. Jack Morris was in the engineering bay, holding the controls for the shield emitters. He kept the power steady, feeding extra energy to the areas where Carter said the attack would hit hardest. Claire Brooks stayed in the medbay with Nora Lane. The lights flickered once, and the sound of weapons fire echoed faintly through the walls. Nora handed Claire a compact scanner. "Watch the monitors for any injured. We move fast when the call comes." On the outer hull, small landing craft from the predators attached themselves to the surface. They tried to cut through the metal with sharp tools, but the Deathworlders were ready. Portable shield walls blocked the breach points, and armed fighters fired bursts of energy that drove the attackers back. Laura stood beside Carter on the bridge, reading the sensor data. "They're trying 3 different points at once," she said. "They're testing to see where we're weakest," Carter replied. "We'll show them we don't have a weak point." In one corridor, Jack joined Deathworlder engineers to reinforce a section of hull that had taken heavy hits. They worked with speed, welding extra plates while another fighter stood guard. Sparks lit the narrow passage, and the sound of metal striking metal filled the air. The predators grew bolder. One managed to cut halfway through a maintenance hatch. Before a Deathworlder, guard fired a heavy shot that sent the attacker spinning into the void. The colonists who saw it were shaken, but also felt a spark of hope. Claire finally got a call. 2 defenders had been hit by fragments from a damaged bulkhead. She and Nora ran through the corridors, the distant hum of weapons fire behind them. They reached the injured quickly, patched the wounds, and sent them back to the line within minutes. Carter moved constantly, giving short, sharp orders through his cum. His voice never rose, but everyone heard the authority in it. Laura mirrored his focus, directing her crew to support the Deathworlders by keeping power steady and watching for any sign of systems failure. The battle stretched on for hours. The predators circled and struck, then pulled back, only to attack again. But every time they tried to force their way in, they met a wall of resistance. The Deathworlders fought with precision, never wasting energy or time. The colonists, inspired by their allies, worked without panic, holding the ship together. Finally, the attack slowed. The shapes outside began to fade back into the black. Carter watched the sensors until the last blip disappeared. "That's it for now," he said. "They'll think twice before coming again." The crew let out slow breaths. Some leaned against the walls, exhausted. Jack wiped the sweat from his face, and Claire rested her hands on her knees for a moment before returning to check on her patients. Laura looked at Carter. "You saved us." Carter shook his head. "We stood together. That's the only reason they're gone." Around the ship, the colonists began to move again, repairing what had been damaged and securing what had held. The corridors still carried the marks of the fight, but the ship was intact. In the quiet after the battle, Laura realized something. The Deathworlders had not just defended them, they had taught them how to stand without fear. It was a lesson she knew they would not forget. The days after the battle passed slowly, but the air on the colony ship felt different. The fear that had hung over the crew was lighter now, replaced by a quiet respect for the people who had come to their aid. The Deathworlders stayed close, patrolling the halls and checking the outer hull as if danger might return at any moment. Captain Laura Bennett walked the ship with Captain Dean Carter, reviewing the repairs. Many panels still showed the marks of the fight, but the systems were holding strong, shield emitters were in place, and the new perimeter sensors were still active. "You should keep them running until your friends arrive," Carter said. "Predators don't like to give up." Laura nodded.
But
We will.
"I'm glad you came when you did." Carter looked at her for a moment before answering. "You know what it's like to wait for help that never comes. That's why we came." In the engineering bay, Jack Morris was working alongside Vince, one of the Deathworlder engineers. They were replacing damaged wiring and adding extra armor to the weakest points of the hull. Jack had learned much in the past few days: how to spot danger before it showed itself, how to make quick repairs under pressure, and how to stay calm when every sound felt like a threat. Claire Brooks was in the medbay, checking the supplies with Nora Lane. Most of the wounded from the fight had recovered enough to return to their duties. Claire found herself talking with Nora about life beyond the safe core worlds. Nora described storms that could tear through buildings, creatures that hunted even in daylight, and the way people learned to watch every shadow. "They say Deathworlders are dangerous," Claire said. Nora smiled slightly. "We are, but not to the people we protect." On the third day after the attack, the sensors picked up a new contact. This time, the approaching ship was exactly what Laura had hoped to see from the beginning: a sleek, bright vessel belonging to their allied alien friends. The news spread quickly through the colony ship. Crew members gathered near the viewports, watching the friendly vessel glide toward them. When the allied ship docked, their captain stepped aboard, looking around at the changed interior of the colony vessel. The guards, the new defenses, the unfamiliar faces of the Deathworlders, it was all a surprise. "You've been busy," the alien captain said. Laura explained briefly what had happened, and how Carter's crew had arrived first. The alien captain listened carefully, then turned to Carter. "Seems we owe you thanks." Carter shook his head. "You owe us nothing. They called for help. and we answered. The Allied crew began assisting with the final repairs, bringing in fresh supplies and fuel. The Deathworlders worked alongside them, though their methods were rougher and faster. There was no clash between them, only a quiet, shared purpose. By the next day, the colony ship was ready to continue its journey. Laura stood on the bridge, looking out at the two ships side by side. Carter joined her. "You could come with us," she said. "We have room, and the trip would be safer with your crew." Carter shook his head. "Our place is out there. Someone else will need us." Laura understood. These people did not wait for orders. They went where danger lived, and they faced it without hesitation. When it was time to part, the crews met at the airlock. Jack shook Vince's hand, and Claire embraced Nora briefly. There were no long speeches, just a few words of respect and gratitude. The Deathworlder ship pulled away first, its dark hull vanishing into the stars. The colony crew watched until it was gone. Then Laura gave the order to set course once again, as the horizon's reach moved forward. Laura thought about the days they had spent together. She thought about the moment she had first seen that dark, scarred ship approaching, and how unsure she had been. Now she knew better. The Deathworlders had come not because it was easy, but because it was hard. They had come because no one else was there yet. In the quiet of the bridge, Laura spoke softly to herself. Friends waited, but Deathworlders answered first. The stars stretched ahead, and the colony ship sailed toward them with a stronger heart than before.